Hi, I'm Tom Migot from Tom Migot Photography, and welcome to this new series dedicated to one software, but not any software. A software that has recently celebrated its 25th birthday. Software which for over 25 years has unleashed fury, generated love, passion, anger, and a lot of polemics. A software which name has become a noun in most written and spoken language. I obviously want to speak about Adobe Photoshop. So why creating this new series about Photoshop now? Well, multiple reasons really. The first one is many of you have asked me to talk about Photoshop, much more than I've done in the past. I did do a few episodes about Photoshop, but you want more than that. And I think that also comes from the fact that now many of you are using Lightroom. You may be using Lightroom from its Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, which includes Photoshop. And therefore you want to start Photoshop, but you don't know how, because it's quite daunting software. It's 25 years under the bonnet, and there's a lot to learn, and it is very daunting. And on a more personal note, I am actually learning, preparing for an exam, which is the expert certification for Photoshop. And trust me, that is daunting. That is a real mountain to climb. This is basically racing the Kilimanjaro, going across the Everest, passing by the Mont Blanc, and climbing a few Scottish Munros on the way. It's massive. So as I'm actually reviewing all the features of Photoshop, some old ones that I forgot, some old ones that I didn't know, some ones that I'm using all the time, but just little subtleties that actually make it even more interesting and give you a different perspective on the tools and techniques. Just make the whole a great opportunity for me to start this series for you. And we are going to start very slowly. We are not going to undertake massive complex edit of composite photographs. We are going to learn the basics. It's going to take quite some time. You need dedication, commitment to learn Photoshop, but I'm hopefully going to try to make it as fun as possible and as easy and with a great pace, so for you to jump into Photoshop and get amazing work out of it. And to do that, well, I needed to start with the most basic and crucial tool inside Photoshop. The tool that you will need to do pretty much 99% of the work in Photoshop. The tool that you need if you want to remove your in-laws from your favorite Christmas picture. I mean the selection tools. And we're going to start today with one of them, and that is called the Marquee tool. And the Marquee tool, like all the other tools in Photoshop, are actually located in the toolbox on the left side. And this is what you have right here. And you notice that all the tools have a little icon at the bottom, like a little corner on the bottom right. And that is to tell you that the tools have more functionalities than the main one that you see. And so we'll go through all the one of the Marquee tool, which is right here. You know, it's not for nothing that the Marquee tool is at the top of the toolbox bar here. It's just like a regular toolbox, really. You know, in your toolbox, the tools that you find at the top are most likely to be the tools that you use all the time. You want them to be easy to access, and that's the reason why you have the Marquee tool at the top. It's not a top one. The top one is the move tool, but in order to talk about the move tool, I need to have some content to move, and therefore to use selection. So that's the reason why we started with the selection tool and the Marquee tool more specifically. So to show you all this, we're going to create a new document. And to create a new document in Photoshop, you basically need to do File, New. We're not going to talk about importing images at this time. So simply File, New Document. And I'm going to use a template, but the template is very easy. It's basically a document, a canvas, that is going to be 1920 pixels by 1080. That's just because that's the common size that I use when I want to create a thumbnail for my videos, for example. And the background is just white, so you guys can actually see much better. So I'm clicking OK. And now what I want to do is I want to zoom in into that document, and there is a magnifying glass. And that magnifying glass, you find it at the bottom of the toolbox. And referring to what I've said earlier about a toolbox and where things are in that toolbox, the reason why the magnifying glass is at the bottom of the toolbox is not because you don't need it. It's simply because you need it all the time that you tend to actually not bother going to the tool itself, but simply use a combination of keys. You will see that in Photoshop is so powerful. Like I said, it's 25 years under the bonnet, full of features, and it comes to a point where you can't find all the functionalities in the menus. It will be subtleties, and to access those you will actually use key combinations, and you will see them appearing on your screen every time I press a key. Bear in mind I'm on the Mac, but I will always tell you what the matching key is if you're on the Windows. So to zoom in, you could use the magnifying glass like I said, but let's learn the first key shortcut here, and that is going to be Control plus or Control minus to zoom in or zoom out. If you're on the PC, on a Mac, it's not Control, it's Command. So let's Command plus, and you see you can zoom in, Command minus or Control minus, zoom out. Another shortcut for you is if you do Control or Command on a Mac, 0. If you do the two of them, what it will do is it will expand your document to the maximum of the surface of your working area. And the working area is basically everything you have from the panel on the right to the panel on the left. That's basically it. So here we have our document fully open, all white. We're going to use the Marquee tool, and we click and hold, and we're going to use first the single column Marquee tool. And I'm going to select roughly in the middle, it doesn't really matter. And what you see here, let me zoom in so you can see much better. So I did click a lot. What you see now is what we call the marching ants. And it's all those little strokes that basically are moving down. Now it delimits your selection. And if I'm actually doing Control 0, Command 0 to just zoom out, basically what we obtain now is a selection that goes the entire height of your document, and its width is going to be 1 pixel. And so to really show you that pixel, we're going to fill every selection that we're going to go through today. We're going to fill that selection with color. And the colors you have it at the bottom of your toolbox. You notice we have something that is like fuchsia, and underneath is white. Fuchsia is the foreground color and white is the background color. You can switch back and forth by simply clicking on this little icon here, or simply clicking on the X key. Look, I'm just clicking on the X key and I'm just switching from one to another. You will see across videos that is actually very interesting to be able to switch from one color to another very quickly, especially when we're going to use white and black to reveal or hide a specific zone in our document. So for now, we're just going to click on the fuchsia, and I just want to set it down to red. We're going to use multiple colors, and let's start with the bottom one, which is the red. So I click OK, and now to fill our selection is very easy. You just go to the Edit menu at the top, and you just go to Fill. When you click Fill, you get the Fill panel, and Fill panel is very easy to use, although very powerful. In the content, by default, you will find foreground color, which basically is our red, which we just defined. But you could also select background color, and in that case, is the white color. Or you can simply select any color you would like, and then you now have the color picker. So I'm just doing cancel. And here you have the blending modes, and I'm not going to go into details about the blending modes because we will cover that in a very far episode from now. So for now, we're just going to select the foreground color and click OK. So it filled it, but we don't see it much, so we need to deselect those marching ants. So to do that, you could just go to the menu Select and do Deselect, or Control D or Command D on the Mac. And we have our first selection that's been painted, and we can see it clearly on the screen. The next type of the Marquee tool is very similar, and it's called a single row Marquee tool. And so you might be smart enough now to know what that might be. I'm just going to click roughly in the middle right here, and you see it's basically the same thing as the tool before, but now it gives you a selection across your document in an horizontal fashion of 1 pixel in height. And same, we're going to fill it. I'm just going to keep the same color, so Edit, Fill. We keep the same options as before, so just click OK. And to deselect the marching ants, we're just going to do Command or Control D on the PC. So here we go. We've done our 2 selections, and we've filled those. And I wanted an intersection to really illustrate what comes next. We're going to use another type of selection, and we're going to jump to the rectangle marquee tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press on the key, on the mouse right now on the intersection, and I'm going to drag while pressing. I'm just going to drag, and you can see I can create a rectangle, and you have this little black frame next to my cursor that shows you the width and the height of your selection. So with that, you could create a square. And how would you do that? Well, the height equal the height equal the width, so fairly easy. But you know, Photoshop is 25 years old now, so there's easier way to create a square. And to do this is while you're actually holding your mouse down, what you need to do is just simply press on the Shift key. And you see now we have a square. And you can go up and down to increase or reduce the size of your square. So I'm just going to release it now, and I'm going to fill it with some color. So let's go for an orange. So click OK, and you remember we go to Edit and Fill, and we leave the same option. We click OK, and we filled it. And now we're just going to press on Control D or Command D, or go to the menu Select to deselect that selection. So that's another way of selecting something. Did you notice that when I actually click at the intersection to make my selection, basically my initial spot where I clicked with the mouse happened to be one of the corners of my selection. So right now it's the top left corner of my rectangle, but if I actually move to the left, it becomes the right one, the bottom right or the bottom left, depending on where I'm going with my drag. Well, sometimes you may actually want to create your selection, and the initial spot where you are needs to be the center of that selection because it will be easier to select. And so in that case, let's say I wanted to create a square, but I wanted that square to be really around the intersection of my lines. Well, to do that, you would just simply press the Alt key while you hold the mouse pressed. And look what happens. Now the center of my selection, the initial point of my selection is the center of my selection, and I can now make the size that I want. So I'm going to create a rectangle because if I keep doing square, people are going to say that I'm too square. So I'm going to make a rectangle. I just release the mouse, and now I have the rectangle. So let's find a new color. I'm just going to go to the yellow, click OK, and Edit, Fill, and press OK. What you can notice now is I can actually move the selection if I wanted to. So I go in the middle and you see the icon changes, right? And I can click and drag. But look what I do. I actually drag my selection zone. I'm not actually moving the zone that has been transformed by that selection. What you will notice is that I cannot resize it, right? And we'll see in another option how we can actually transform it. But for now, I can no longer drag. If I click, I will lose it. You see? I can move it while I'm inside, but if I want to, there's no way I can reduce it. So it might be interesting sometime when you want to place your selection. Let's say I'd like to place it here in the square, but I'd like to resize it. So how would I do this? Well, now what I would do is you need to think about it before you actually release the mouse. And what it is you create a selection, you keep your finger pressed on the mouse. But now if you press the space bar, look what happened at my little black window near my cursor. Before we had the width and the height of your selection. If I press space, I now see the coordinate, X and Y. So I can move my selection to the right and to the left, as well as up and down. And I can move the selection to where I want to cover, for example, a zone. But what if I wanted to redraw that zone afterwards? Well, when I'm happy with the location, I release the spacebar and I can keep drawing it because my finger is still on the mouse. I can press the Shift as well to make it a square. I can press the Alt key to make it to the center. And even that afterwards, if I really like it, if I have fingers left, I can press on the spacebar to move it around. So right now I have my 3 fingers on the keyboard, which is not easy, but you don't need to press all this. You could discard the Alt, but bear in mind where you want it. And when you're happy with it, the first thing you do is not release your fingers. you release the mouse first. And you have your selection. I'm just going to fill that so you can actually see better the selection. I'm going to make it green and quickly fill in green. So you may have noticed before, if now I go click somewhere else, it will create a new selection, but it will discard this selection here. Let me do it. You see, I've got a new selection, but I lost that selection. I didn't lose the transformed area. I just lost the matching ends, the selection itself. If I create somewhere else, you see every time I click somewhere, I got a new selection, but I lose the other one. Well, sometimes you may want to change different zone in your document at the same time. You want to apply the same changes in multiple zones. And so you will need to do multiple selections. And to do that, well, once you have clicked once, all you need to do is press the Shift key. And look, you notice the cursor? Now you have a plus sign underneath it. So I can click and I can create as many selections as I want. And the advantage, as I said, is that you can modify the content of that selection all at once. So here I'm changing the color and I'm going to edit, fill, and fill it. And look at this. All those zones, all those selections are actually transformed at once with the same setting. So very, very powerful thing. Sometimes you may not want to add extra selected zone selections. You simply want to remove some. Well, in that case, we learned about a Shift key, right? Making the plus sign. Well, once again, if now you use the Alt key before ever pressing on your key, on your mouse, you will see that you have a minus key. And you can remove any selections you want. You see? So the blue is still there, but the selection isn't. And in fact, now if you want to see that more obvious, if I change the color of whatever remains selected, I fill it, click OK, you notice that my two zone here, blue, didn't change because they were no longer selected. And the others, the dark blue one, are still selected. Sometimes you may want to actually increase the zone that is selected, but you also want to make something that is combined, like intersect. And to do that, you will need to actually press Shift and Alt. And look what happened. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select some part of all those selections and only keep some zone. Basically, once I'm going to release the mouse, and you notice that under my cursor now I have an X, right? Once I'm going to release that mouse, what's going to happen is whatever is inside of that rectangle that I'm drawing, and that is part of a selected zone, will remain selected. Everything else will be discarded. To see better, I'm just going to paint inside that new zone so you guys see it better. Fill and OK. So do you understand now? You can actually increase the number of selections in your document. You can reduce your selection, and you can even make some selections that are part of the other, the common selections. If you forget about this combination of keys, you know, Shift, and Alt, well, fear not, because look at the top of your screen. You have a bar here for the marquee tool. And the first option, if I just let the mouse on it, it says New Selection, and that's the default behavior. You create a selection, and the second one will basically discard the former one. The second option is what we saw. It's adding a selection. That's basically the plus. And you see I'm not pressing on any key, and you have the plus under the cursor. The third one, you guessed it, is the minus option. So that was the equivalent of the Alt. And the last one, the fourth one, is the intersect of the selection, and that's basically the cross. So if you forgot about a key combination, you can always use the options right here. There is another feature type of marquee tool, and that's the elliptical marquee tool. And the elliptical marquee tool works exactly the same way as the rectangle, but it gives you an ellipse. So if you've got an oval and you want to make it a circle, how actually do you transform an oval into a circle? You're not going to bother just looking at the width and height. No, you apply the same logic as the rectangle transforming into a square. You press the Shift key and suddenly you get a circle, a perfect circle. What if you want to actually make sure that the initial point where you clicked is not one side or one corner of a circle. Corner of a circle? Nah. But you see what I mean? One side of your circle. Well, instead of doing that, if you want it to be at the center of your circle, well, press the Alt key and look at this. The point is your center of selection, which is, trust me, extremely interesting. Let's say you would like to select a face, or you would like to select a basketball and you'd like to change the color, or select the moon. Well, if you were to select from the side, it would be quite difficult. You go in the middle of the object, and now it's actually much easier. What if you wanted to move it? Spacebar, and it works the same way. You release the mouse, and then you make a color fill, click OK, and you have it. And you do a Command or Control D to unselect. And that is basically everything you can do with your selection. But have you seen? This is just a marquee tool. All these things that you can do is very powerful. So I know what you just saw here. It doesn't look like a photograph. It doesn't seem to be photography related. But trust me, it is. Because as we said in Photoshop, you first select to correct. So the better you select, the better your correction will be. So it all starts here. So I hope you found this informative. I hope you like the pace of this video. Let me know in the comments if you want more, and we're going to review all the tools like this one by one, making it simple. And as we understand more about the tools, then we will use more and more real photograph to really illustrate the purpose of that. But here we're talking about the real basic one. And don't forget, Photoshop is great for photo, as the name implies, but you can do so much more in Photoshop. You can create real document, making text and everything, and we'll go through that. So, until then, this is Tom Migot saying, if you like it, well, capture it and maybe play with Photoshop. Ciao.